Why are you always asking me if I play other video game genres apart from RPGs? Do you honestly believe all I do is play RPGs and JRPGs? Well, no. I do play games from other different genres, fighting games, platformers, environmental puzzles, horror games, etc. Come on! I have covered a lot of games from different genres in the past. You just didn't watch those videos. So, as a result, now I'm gonna do a video about all of those games from different genres that I've covered before. However, I don't think you wanna see me talking about the popular games like Street Fighter, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mortal Kombat, Mario. Instead, what I'm gonna do is show you the hidden gems, the obscure games from different genres that are totally worth checking out. So let's begin! Fate Extella, the Umbral Star. Currently there's 2 games in the Extella series, this one and Link. I haven't played Link yet. The Umbral Star I initially played and beat on the PS4 and it's great. I actually feel most of its popularity comes from there, mostly due to its visuals. Frame drop issues are there though, same as with the Vita version. After playing it, however, I can tell the PS4 version is superior, but only in terms of graphics. Controls and gameplay work wonders on the Vita, even though a lot of people prefer the other versions. I call this Musou Warrior style of game underrated because I think it deserves a better rating and more mainstream popularity. The story is decent enough with amazing writing no matter the character you choose. Initially though, you can only play the story mode with Saber and you can beat the game with just her if you want to, but the game encourages you to try it with its 2 other characters later on. And of course, as you make progress, you can unlock more characters, but only during battle or certain extra missions. Like I said, it's one of those Dynasty Warriors-like games where you battle through hordes of enemies and eventually a boss. The missions will have you kill specific types of enemies and bosses while defending certain areas. Don't skip on the Vita version unless you really care that much about the graphics. 99 Vidas. I want to talk about this game for a while. It's available pretty much everywhere nowadays, but I played it on the Switch. It's a 2D beat-em up developed by an indie studio from Brazil called Cubite Interactive. I don't know much about Brazil, but if you play the game, you'll get a lot of vibes of how life was over there during the early 90s. I believe that was the intention of the developers when creating this game, and it plays very well with some funny and cool ideas and excellent controls. Several versions of this game have both a local and online multiplayer. Up to 4 players can join simultaneously. This is a great indie game and a must play if you like beat 'em ups. Magic Sword. An overlooked gem on the Super Nintendo is Magic Sword by Capcom. It is a side-scroller with incredibly good music, fast-paced action and great controls. By looking at it, I know it looks like your average, Castlevania clone, but the RPG elements are what makes it different. First of all, and one of the aspects that stands out the most, is that you can have allies. Yes, only one at a time though, but as you keep advancing and getting these keys, you will be able to switch between them. They'll fight by your side, by themselves, controlled by the AI, while following you around. Magic is highly noticeable here since it includes spells and books that you can use to fight your enemies. You can perform these attacks using one book or sacrificing a bar of your HP. So obviously the game's all about knowing when to use these magics and experimenting with your different party members. Last but not least, it's worth to mention that there are different routes to follow, with secret doors that allow you to bypass certain levels. This great hidden gem was also released on several Capcom collections and digital re-releases on different platforms. Chicondo Soul Eater. This is a Korean bullet hell also released on everything. It got a physical release and a limited edition, but it's very hard to find and somewhat pricey. It's influenced by Korean and Japanese folklore and mythology, so it's very spiritual, with bizarre demons and strange creatures, as you can see with some enemies and bosses. Controls, music and difficulty are superb. Obviously, like most shoot 'em ups, it's quite challenging, but with several difficulty options. The 2-player co-op mode works really well here, even though sometimes it's hard to distinguish what the hell is going on with so many bullets. But that's exactly what makes this so appealing. This is actually my favorite shooter, even though it's still a genre I'm getting more and more into lately. Killer is dead. Like many games developed by Suda51, this is yet another extremely weird, wacky and silly publication. It's a hack and slash, but obviously it has some unique mechanics to it that offer more variety. It's got slightly clunky controls on purpose so you can feel its craziness, I guess. It's all about building up the combo meter with your sword attacks, but you can also use a gun arm attack, though doing that changes the view to shoulder perspective. Some enemies need to be finished off with a badass cinematic shenanigan, because of course this is a grasshopper game. Crazy ass story, crazy ass character, crazy ass fan service, you name it. If you're a fan of the developers, this is definitely a must play. It was also released on PC and the PS3. Arcana Heart. This is a fighting game developed by Yuki Enterprise, whose members worked on Samurai Shodown 5. Actually, the game's controls feel kinda similar to the Showdown series, especially the 5th one. Don't waste your time with the story, cause it's all about the magical girls that can communicate with beings called the Arcana. You're here for the combat, which is actually the spotlight. It only uses 4 buttons, 3 of them being for different attacks that can lead to combos. The 4th one is for homing attacks and spells, which involve the Arcana. In fact, once you select your character, you also need to choose the Arcana so they can have their own special moves and homing attacks. I recommend this game if you're into fighting games with that unique perk to them, and also if you don't mind the lollies and the so-called maidens yelling their guts out. Revenge of the Bird King. This retro-looking side-scroller combines platforming and some good old run and gun. It's pretty much a silly Metroidvania, but one that plays very nice with some unique ideas. For example, you can use different types of guns, most of them with limited ammo, and a trusty knife for close combat. Thing is, you plant and grow these guns. Yeah, makes no sense, but it's fun. I only included this game on the list for 2 reasons. 1, to make you laugh, and 2, to show you how sometimes the silliest and simplest games can actually be very fun to play. Velocity Ultra. This is a remake of a game originally released on PSP and PS3, a highly unique shoot 'em up with puzzle elements. It's called Velocity because there's always a timer to complete the mission and escape. The goal is to rescue survivors locked up in these capsules while teleporting to wherever they might be and fighting aliens. The screen scrolls slowly, but you can use a boost button to speed it up. This is a game that heavily plays with your senses, as you need to memorize which button does what, and sometimes reacting fast enough to avoid death, which means teleporting, shooting and boosting at the same time, is very hard. And it obviously gets harder the more you advance, but it's so addictive to play. Most people are familiar with Velocity 2X, its sequel, and yes, it's the better game, but I feel this one doesn't get the recognition it deserves. Bladestorm, The 100 Years' War. This is a very experimental game, also available on the PS3, PS4, PC and Xbox One. It looks like a Dynasty Warriors clone, but it isn't. Here you'll customize your mercenary who will become an army leader to take on different quests. Since the game involves historical events, historical figures will therefore take a part in the overall plot. Unlike the Warriors titles, this is not a hack and slash adventure. This is a real-time strategy game where you lead your characters and their soldiers to fight against hordes of enemies. However, the fighting will be done by selecting several actions of the squad you'll be commanding. They'll be controlled by the AI and you'll have to maneuver by giving them orders. Weaknesses play a major role here. For example, cavalry is strong against sword infantry but weak against lancers, and so on. So deciding which type of squad to lead for which battles is the key to victory. Also, these are played on real time and each breaks down by days, which in the game translates as 10 minutes. Within that time, you'll have to focus on destroying enemy squads, capturing villages, castles, or even cities. In the end, it's all about deciding through these long maps which nation you'll favor with your victories. So if you're up for something experimental, try out Bladestorm, as it is definitely a very unique experience. Rapid reload on the original PlayStation, but this game only came out in Japan and in Europe. It didn't come out in North America. It's very good. It's developed by Mediavisium, the same people who created the Wild Arms series. You can choose between two characters, the guy or the girl. They have funny names. I think the guy's last name is Sonics, and the girl's name is like Ruka Hetfield, like the guy from Metallica. Yeah. But anyway, so great, amazing controls. The sprite animations are beautiful, really good. Controls are responsive. Obviously it's very difficult. It's a run and gun game, retro-looking run and gun game, which means obviously it's very hard. You have 4 different types of weapons, and you need to learn when to use these weapons, when to switch to each of these weapons, because obviously each weapon is stronger against certain types of bosses or certain types of enemies. And you obviously get, as you move on, you get a lot of boosts and a lot of different power-ups, etc. So it's just very good. And the music, the graphics, the controls, the difficulty, like I mentioned, it has a silly story. There's no point talking about the story, but it's there. If you're interested in story, so it's there and it's okay, I guess. And the music is great too. Too bad it didn't come out in North fucking America, man. That breaks my heart, but it's okay. Emulation. Kadash. Kadash is a neat side-scroller action RPG where you can play as 2 different characters. It was also released on the TurboGrafx that very same year. However, the original version was from the arcade, and this Genesis port, honestly, couldn't be better. It can be a very short adventure if you know what you're doing, otherwise you'll be grinding and finding out where to go all the time. That's in a good sense, as this game has decent controls, a cool soundtrack, and I gotta admit, some really cool boss battles here and there. Little Witch Nobeta. It's a third-person shooter that invites exploration and puzzle elements. You play as the witch Nobeta, who wants to find her missing memories. Her goal is to explore a ginormous dungeon-like castle and get to the throne. Well, that last part seems to be the goal of the talking black cat she saves at first. Anyway, you walk around with her and fight with either magic or the staff. Now, this is a game allegedly inspired by the Souls games, but it's nowhere near as challenging as those. It can still get quite hard, of course, so don't underestimate it. The enemy design is creepy as hell and I love it. But it creates a bad contrast with the characters, especially the witch herself. She's a cute loli, as you can see. I wish she could have been older. It would have given the game a much serious tone. Anyway, back to the gameplay. You use the triggers to attack, so if you're not used to that, it'll take you a while to get used to them, to remember which button does what. It's got some RPG elements like nearly every video game in existence today. Killing enemies gives you points that you can use to increase your stats. Magic also levels up. Some of it is passive, like wind magic used to double jump. There are 4 attack magic spells and they all do different things. You can switch to any of them at any given time. That's the third-person shooter stuff actually. You practically fire magic bullets at your enemies, and some can be even charged for a powerful blast. Ice magic is by far the best one because it's like a machine gun and it doesn't often require using the target trigger to aim properly. Bosses are epic as expected and tough as nails, but they are the best part of this game in my opinion. Overall, this is a fun game that I definitely wasn't expecting to like or even recommend. Akai Katana. Akai Katana is a bullet hell developed by Cave only on arcade and the Xbox 360. As in most anime-style shoot-em-ups, you can choose between a variety of different characters and different modes, but it all takes place during the Taisho period in Japan. My buddy Oscar talked about this game in a previous video I did called Super Obscure Gems, in case you want to know more details about it. It's got great controls, music and challenge. In fact, I found it pretty damn hard, like most bullet hells of course. Even on easier difficulties it can still kick your ass. Try this one out if you can, cause it's really good. But I'm not sure you'll find easily a copy of it for a decent price anymore. Arcana Heart 3 Love Max. This is a fighting game and an enhanced version of the original arcade release in 2011. It was also released on the PlayStation 3 and Windows. Forget about the story here, it's beyond stupid and it doesn't really matter like in most fighting games. The controls are superb here, way better than its previous entries in the series. That's what makes it stand out so much. You got your force gauge bar to fill up in order to execute your special attacks, now called Extend Force. Getting these supers is not too hard, but there's also a simple mode to have them assigned on one button. It's more combo based than technical, which is why I obviously liked it even better. Brawl Brothers. Developed and published by Jaleco, it's part of an obscure series called Rushing Beat. It is the second game in that series, followed by Peacekeepers, which is also on the same emulator, but that one's kinda lame, so I suggest you stick with Brawl Brothers. 5 playable characters are there and you can choose 2 for your adventure. You'll play mostly with the first character you chose, and if you die, you can switch to the other one on continue. The gameplay is exactly the same as in most beat-em-ups of its time, like Streets of Rage or Final Fight, but there's also an angry mode where if you're getting gangbanged or something, your strength increases for a period of time. Overall, it's a very solid game, almost as great as the legendary beat-em-ups I mentioned. Lumo. Lumo is an environmental puzzle released everywhere, developed by an indie studio. Obviously it's a love letter to Solstice on the NES, and it often feels as if it was a remake of it, because it plays in an isometric view and its puzzles heavily involve platforming, except here they're fully in 3D. The music is what really stands out here, composed by Phil Nixon. It was such a big deal, the soundtrack was released almost 2 years before the game itself. I can see why, since most of the time, the music is what drives you to keep playing the trial and error. It's extremely challenging though, but fortunately you respawn in every room you die. Last but not least, there's a lot of secrets here, hidden rooms and even minigames, so that puts a heavy emphasis on its natural exploration. Great game here. Mobile Light Force 2. This is actually the very first Castle Shikigami game. It's just stupid-ass XS Games changed the name to make it look like a sequel to Mobile Light Force on the PS1, which is actually Gone Bird, and the games have nothing to do with each other. Man, what a freaking mess! And what pisses me off the most is that they reused the same ultra-generic cover from the first game on the PS1 with those 3 girls that aren't even in the game! In Europe, it was abbreviated to MLF2. Yeah, practically MILF2. Whatever, man. Just ignore the name and the cover and just think it's Castle Shikigami 1, alright? And it's a great game, just like its 2 sequels. They're all vertical shoot-em-ups with great controls and excellent pacing. This one is a direct port from the arcade in Japan, and over there, it was released on several different consoles. We only got the PS2 version. It's called Castle Shikigami because, like many shoot-em-ups, it's all about multiplying your points. When in Shikigami mode, you can increase this multiplier to gather all items dropped by the enemies. It's a pretty badass game, so I hope you can find a way to play it, even if it's on another system. And now that I've mentioned its sequel, Castle Shikigami 2. It's a direct sequel to the previous game, but now it has more playable characters. And once again, it was released on the arcade, then ported to everywhere, but we only got the PS2 version. Thankfully, as you saw in the cover when I showed it, it was localized as Casual Shikigami 2. XS Games finally realized their brutally idiotic mistake from before. Nice. This game is just as good as its predecessor, but I actually like it more because not only does it have slightly better visuals, I also think the controls work better. Now, the first game under its ridiculous name can still be found at a reasonable price nowadays. This one, however, is more expensive and rarer, but it shouldn't be crazy expensive, even with the pandemic. Just don't let scalpers rip you off on this. That, or you could just emulate it like I did. Our World is Ended. I've never been much into visual novels, especially not when that's pretty much all they are, novels, 90% reading and 10% decision making. But this is one that is funny as hell and couldn't pass the opportunity to recommend it. An indie development team is trying to create a virtual reality game, but thanks to an error, they end up inside of it. Soon they start realizing something's really wrong and that they didn't end up there out of a mere error. If I'm gonna play a visual novel that's mostly just reading, I wanna read a really dark one, or at least a really funny one. Our World is Ended fits that last description easily. Moondiver. This is a 2D side-scroller inspired by the retro classics like Ninja Gaiden or Strider. It was developed by Feel Plus, a company that also helped Miss Walker in the development of Lost Odyssey. It's digital only, available on PS3 and 360. You select between 4 playable characters and go onto different wasted landscapes to fight your way through. It's basically a hack and slash in 2D with great controls, by the way. Each character has a special power, and the game has some very small RPG elements like having HP and MP and gaining experience points. It also has a local couch co-op mode. It used to have an online multiplayer mode, but it's not working anymore. But I imagine it was a lot of fun to play with somebody else online. Overall, it's a great game that can be pretty addictive to play even offline. Claymates. Claymates is a charming side-scroller that only came out in Europe and North America. Clayton has been transformed into a ball of clay, and his father has been kidnapped by an evil witch doctor, so he must go and save him, but fortunately he has the power to transform into other animals when making contact with other clay balls. So the goal of the game will be to traverse these layouts from point A to point B. Every animal has a unique advantage to them, like the cat being able to climb trees, or the mouse being able to move and jump faster. Every time you get hit, you lose that animal and transform back to the clay ball. You can still move, jump, and even punch things like that, so it's not much of a problem. I like the colors, the ideas, and the controls here. It's definitely a pretty decent game, different from your usual side-scroller. Blade Strangers. Blade Strangers is a crossover fighting game featuring many characters from indie titles or games published by Nicalis, most notably Shovel Knight and Cave Story. It even has the guy from The Binding of Isaac, so for that reason it should be more popular, but I guess including several characters from pretty much hidden gems that no one knows about makes it obscure. Hell, it's got Solange from Code of Princess. It's an incredibly well done 2D fighting game available also on PC and the Switch. It's more of a combo-based fighter where you can create several attacks in a row by pressing just a few buttons. I love these types of fighting games as I'm usually bad at technical fighters like Tekken for example. This is a great game and one of my favorites of the genre in this generation. I don't think it has the recognition it deserves. Under Night in Birth. This 2D fighting game was originally released on the PS3 and PC, later it got some updated versions on other systems. One such version is the PS4 release, which I think it might be the best of them all. 3 developers were behind this fighter masterpiece, including legendary Arc System Works. Like Blade Strangers, it's more of a button masher than technical, so I loved it. Usually I can only play well with a couple of characters in fighting games. Here I got into several of them with no issues. But it isn't a mindless measure. You have 3 buttons for its light, medium and heavy attacks. They can be used to cancel your enemy's attacks as well. A GRD system is also there to manipulate in order to increase offense or defense. I love the controls here, the graphics, the music, the character design and the variety of moves. Definitely one of the best fighting games of this generation and criminally overlooked. Eternal Blade. This is kind of a Metroidvania and it's available pretty much everywhere, but I play the Vita version of course. The story follows Freya on a quest for revenge against the evil lord who destroyed her hometown. To do this, she wields the mysterious Eternal Blade. The controls are decent enough with awesome combos when you fight your enemies, but the point of the game is its puzzles that revolve around time itself. That's right, you can control time here to rewind it in order to go back to where you came from, or move forward, or even defeat some of the bosses. There's also the usual platforming involved. It's basically a cross-genre with small Metroidvania features. Pretty solid too. There's a sequel to it, but I haven't played it. Nightshade. Believe it or not, this is a spin-off of the popular Shinobi series. It was released back in 2003 and it's still an exclusive on the PS2. It's also a sequel to that Shinobi game which is also on the PS2. Developed by Overworks, now basically one of the many Sega divisions, it's a hack and slash game that plays very similar to Shinobi, but with a female protagonist named Hibana and a much faster gameplay. The goal of the game is to have Hibana eliminate the evil bastards from the evil Nakatomi Corporation. That and also to find some shards from a cursed sword. Missions are pretty linear most of the time, having you defeating the enemies and fighting a boss at the end. Sounds repetitive, but hack and slash games are always like this, aren't they? I first met Hibana when she appeared in Project Cross Zone 2, a gigantic crossover that I love on the 3DS. Unfortunately, Nightshade on the PS2 has become somewhat rare and expensive, costing almost what a new modern game costs. Super Valis IV. The fourth and final entry in this very niche series before the trademark became an adult visual novel. Anyway, previous games were released in North America for the Genesis and the TurboGrafx CD, although in Japan they were released also on several computer systems. For this game, however, the PC Engine version stayed in Japan and we only got the Super Nintendo release. Europe never got any of them. It's a side-scroller action game where you control the heroine Lina. She can run, jump and crouch, but only attack in one direction with her sword. By pressing up and the attack button, she can also shoot a magic bullet. You will find other projectile weapons that you can select with the triggers, and some will obviously be very useful against the bosses. It's a pretty challenging game despite being beatable in about an hour or so. Story takes place 15 years after Valis III, and all games are connected, that's right. So it will take me a long time to explain it. If you care about it that much, definitely give the others a try. Bomberman Tournament. I know it's hard to believe there's a Bomberman game with strong RPG elements, but trust me, it's real, and it's good. Obviously, you play as Bomberman in this quest-driven game, where your goal is to find caravans to train them for the tournament. You will enter towns to gather information and side quests that will take you to the overworld. In these top-down view areas, the gameplay will be like a classic Bomberman. You need to position your bombs to defeat the enemies and carve your way through. The caravans part is very similar to Pokemon, as you will acquire them in order to train them. The purpose is to have them fight in these one-on-one battles. Here you will select the 3 actions your creature will execute. Then the combat will begin on turns, but you won't have any control. It's weird and it relies a lot on luck and strategy. However, once you start learning the patterns and the weaknesses of your enemies, it'll be more fun. Overall, Bomberman Tournament is a neat action-adventure game worth checking out for its charm and uniqueness. Fragile Dreams. Farewell, Ruins of the Moon. Here's yet another original game, but one that's extremely unique and hard to label. It's basically a cross-genre, but in the end, it's just an adventure game by Core by Kentaro Kawashima from Tree Crescendo. With beautiful colors and music, Fragile Dreams is yet another post-apocalyptic story. You take control of Seto, whose grandfather has recently passed away. After reading a letter from him that tells him to go to a tower where he'll find survivors, Seto's journey begins. He finds this weird girl who seems to be connected with the origins of the ruined Tokyo, therefore these two becomes part of his endeavor. Because of its survival horror elements, you'll barely be able to see anything on certain areas, but that's made on purpose to make you look for clues. Seto will also find a machine that will help him on his quest, unlocking clues and, well, just making conversation. Here you'll have to go around with a flashlight and fight ghosts. This is where the motion controls come in, as you need to aim with the Wiimote at the screen so you can efficiently hurt some of them. Why? Because the light makes them vulnerable. You will gain experience points by fighting all types of enemies. Now, since Fragile Dreams is a highly unique game, it's hard to explain how the boss battles will be, as every one of them has very different requirements. In the end though, it's not exactly a role-playing game, but its elements are there to give the gameplay even more variety. Trapped. Trapped is part of the Deception series, some bizarre but also unique games that started back on the PlayStation. The first one was an action RPG in first person where the goal was to set traps to kill your enemies. The others were in third person, but the RPG banner was gone. Trapped was the only one released on the PlayStation 2, and it acts more like a spin-off than anything. You take control of Princess Alicia, translated as Allura for whatever reason. She and her retainer Rachel escape the castle when somebody kills the king. Her stepmother, the Queen Catalina, frames her from this to make matters worse. Rachel and Alicia arrive in a mansion for safe haven, which is where most of the game will take place. Upon forming a pact with the mysterious entity, Alicia acquires the power of using traps. So the game revolves around you running around the different rooms of the mansion while positioning your traps to stop and kill your enemies. Where you put them and how you use them will have to vary depending on the type of foe you will face. Or you can just stick with the usual set of 3 traps if you feel more comfortable. So your strategies influence how much points and money you'll get, which act a little bit like an experience system. Especially since that's how you acquire new traps and their respective upgrades. Trapped is quite the hidden gem, definitely if you want to try something completely different from any type of game whatsoever. The Legend of Valkyrie. This one is a classic arcade game that remained in Japan for quite some time until its inclusion on Namco Museum Volume 5 on the PlayStation. There was also a port on the PC Engine, but once again, only in Japan. You play as Valkyrie in a quest to defeat the evil lord in order to bring peace back to Marvel-land. You might recognize her as she is one of the many playable characters in Namco Cross Capcom and the Project Cross Zone games. Also, this game is a sequel to another only in Japan game that, well, it's not very good in my opinion. A top-down view perspective awaits you as you control Valkyrie fighting enemies with her different magics. These are bound to her sword and can be either obtained randomly or purchased from the shop you'll see several times throughout the game. Because of this, it might feel a little bit like a shoot-em-up of some sorts. Often you will encounter characters that will give you clues or magic spells. The sense of exploration is what also gives the game some RPG elements. You see, depending on how you explore, you might find useful stuff or money. For so to say, it plays similarly to the first Legend of Zelda game. If you can't get your hands on the PS1 port, try the TurboGrafx Mini, where the game was also released. Or you can just emulate the many versions of it just to see the differences. I personally recommend the other two though, since they're the best out there to play, in my opinion. Caladrius Blaze. Caladrius or Caladrius, whatever it is pronounced, is a vertical shoot 'em up with heavy fan service and a story-driven adventure. It was first released digitally on the Xbox 360 and later ported to the PS3, but that version stayed in Japan. That is until its re-release on the PS4, Switch and PC a few years ago. The point of the game is to play as any of the many playable characters and complete their arcs. I beat it with 3 characters and didn't see much change, so I'm not sure what happens if you finish it with all. Controls are amazingly responsive, as are the triggers, the weapon switching and the bombs. It's honestly everything you want in a shoot 'em up. However, there's a lot of eroge here, since every time your character gets hit, your clothes get ripped off. Same applies for your enemies, but only if they get a major hit. The music, like in most shoot 'em ups, is masterful, so overall it's a fantastic game and a great combination of ecchi and shooter. Puppeteer. Another one that got expensive during COVID is Puppeteer, exclusive to the PS3 by the way. It's a beautiful platformer in both 2D and 3D at the same time that's also very unique. It plays as if you were watching a puppet show in a theater with weird and over-the-top character designs. You can play this game by yourself or with someone else in local co-op, because you control Kutaro, a boy that's been transformed into a headless puppet, but also a companion that will serve to interact with certain unreachable objects. Kutaro can equip up to 3 different heads that serve different purposes, and fight with giant scissors to cut down his path to next stages and bosses. Other accessories will be unlocked as you progress, like a grapple and a shield. There's more to it than it appears, it's just full of very carefully designed details. Definitely one of the most unique games released on the PS3. Operation Logic Bomb. This one is a top-down view action game where you'll control an agent called Logan. You start with only 2 types of ammo, the regular machine gun and the spread. As you make progress, you'll get more types of ammo, and some can be used to solve puzzles or defeat certain enemies easier. In fact, the game can be very hard if you don't know what's the best ammo for them. But fortunately you get 4 continues. The story is really hard to follow, as all you do occasionally is find these terminals where you seem to get visions from the past. Apparently Logan is sent to avoid a dimensional catastrophe because all contact with a bunch of scientists was lost. The game has great controls, nice interface and pretty much great gameplay, but like many Jalico games, it didn't get a lot of marketing out there. It's also on the Switch emulator by the way. Chaos Legion. So this game was made by Capcom in an attempt to create something similar to Devil May Cry, but with RPG elements. It's a hack and slash alright, but not as fast-paced as most of those games. This one is rather technical, as it revolves around the main character having the ability to control summons called legions. Each one of them will play differently with their abilities and skills. They will gain experience and improve the more you fight and complete missions. It plays somewhat like Castlevania Curse of Darkness now that I think about it. Also, this is yet another twisted and dark as hell story. It doesn't focus too much on it, but it somehow feels very powerful and present. This is an amazing game. Nevertheless, just like Haunted, I do believe it can be an acquired taste as well, since it's very hard and not too friendly with newcomers. If you give it a few tries though and endure, I can at least vouch for it becoming a rather unique experience. Valkyrie Drive, Bhikkhuni. Okay, well, I know it's a fan service game, but I'm a sucker for beat 'em ups, and I'll always play them at least once no matter what. It's not your classic 2D beat 'em up though, as it plays fully in 3D, but the button mashing, the fast-paced action and the crazy fun is all there, man. I mean, these girls could be dudes or creatures or whatever for all I care, and I will still be here recommending it. In this game though, besides the strong sexualization content that I won't cover because YouTube, you know, you'll be reading a lot of dialogue, almost like a visual novel. Yes, it's a dumb story, but it gets surprisingly interesting with even some political views. There's almost zero customization or equipment upgrades, but your girls do level up, and trust me, this is a hard game that even on easy mode can get very challenging. Therefore, sometimes you'll need to grind in order to increase your level and have better chances. Valkyrie Drive is a great beat 'em up, but yeah, I guess it's only for people who enjoy the huge fan service or can at least tolerate it. Hunted: The Demon's Forge. Let me say this right off the bat. This game is an acquired taste. It didn't do very well in the reviews and it certainly got a mixed reception from gamers. Why? Because it's just too difficult and controls can be quite clunky depending on the type of equipment you have. And while I certainly agree with the criticism, I somehow set aside some pleasant moments and managed to beat it and enjoy it. Hunted is an action game where you control two characters. Sometimes you'll need to switch between them both, but you can play almost the entire adventure with just one. The dude can equip heavy armor and weapons while the girl does the standard swords and bow. It's not an RPG because its major focus is on the mission after mission playstyle, hovering over 10 or 12 hours. But the elements are there, clearly visible, as characters level up, upgrade equipment, and learn several different skills. This is a very dark game, but with a strong sense of humor and notorious fan service. So there's also some boost to its linear story. Like I said before, it's an acquired taste, and I strongly recommend it to people looking for a good challenge. Aquapazza. Aquapazza or Aquapazza, whatever, is a 2D fighting game originally released for the arcades in Japan. A North American port was released for the PlayStation 3, meaning it's basically an exclusive to it. And it actually is a crossover from many games developed by companies Aqua Plus and Leaf, most notably the Uta Wareru Mono series and the original Tears to Tiara. Several characters are there to choose from, and you can also select a partner that you can summon for certain moves. However, this isn't a combo-based game per se. Sure, there are combos to be done by button mashing your controller, but it's also somewhat technical. You know, like the Street Fighter games where you gotta pull out some moves and supers. Overall, it's an excellent game that greatly combines those two fighting modes really well. Thunder Spirits. This game is actually Thunder Force 3, released on the arcade and the Sega Genesis. The arcade version was then ported to the Super Nintendo, but for some reason they changed the name to Thunder Spirits, hence why most people don't even know it's the same game as the one on the Genesis. Like many other horizontal shoot-em-ups, the graphics are excellent, the music is badass, and the sprites are beautiful. You can choose at the beginning which planet you'll play through first. The order, however, doesn't really matter. Several weapons are available to use, like the claws for example, which were there in the previous Thunder Force games. However, dying means you lose that weapon, so you need to be careful. As you may have imagined, the game's quite challenging, but you can change the difficulty if you feel it's too hard. Great game here and very underrated. If you know why they changed the name for the SNES release, let us know in the comments. Horizon Chase Turbo. I'm not really into racing games, but if I had to choose one of the very few that I like, is this one. It's a Brazilian game inspired by the classics Outrun or Top Gear, released on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and modern computer systems. I obviously played the PS4 version, a game I gifted to my buddy Oscar. He loved the game and I clearly saw why. The graphics look absolutely beautiful and the stages are very different each time. The controls are also superb. I usually suck balls at racing games, but I managed to get into this one quite easily. I'm not sure why this game isn't more rated and well known, could be for many different reasons that I disagree with. It's excellent and I strongly believe it needs more attention. Cro Sigma. I probably pronounced the first word wrong, but anyway, this is a hack and slash game with 4 playable characters, but you gotta beat an entire mission with the first heroine to unlock the next one and so on. Missions are quite long and you can't save in between. They're pretty simple though. You beat a bunch of enemies, then move on to the next floor, etc. until you beat a major boss. The girls can equip 4 different swords, each attached to an action button. You'll find these swords randomly by defeating enemies. The game has good controls, but it's all about abusing the dash button and the sword skills, cause the regular ones are kinda lame. You also level up the more you fight. Sometimes 2 girls can fight together at the same time, but you can only control one. There's dialogue in here, but fortunately not that much, keeping it silly but simple. This is a really fun game to play every now and then, check it out. Guilty Gear Judgment. Another PSP release from a famous franchise that didn't get enough love is this game. It's a spin-off, but it's not a fighting game. Instead, it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up starring characters from the series. At the beginning you can only choose 5 of them, but as you complete the game, others will be unlocked. Controls are great and very responsive here, although faster and different from most beat-em-ups out there. The thing is, controls are actually based on the fighting games, which means you'll probably experience the adventure as if you were playing one. Several stages await every single character, but they're all the same including the bosses no matter which one you choose. I'd stick with one and beat the game with it. Just keep in mind that they all control completely different to one another as in a regular Guilty Gear game. I really enjoyed this little spin-off and I fell in love with its soundtrack. Oh my god, it rocked my ass off! What's even more awesome is that this version includes Guilty Gear X2 fully playable with PSP graphics. So how can one kick-ass beat-em-up that includes another full game be so underrated? Probably because the main title is a spin-off most people didn't get to play. Xevious. I don't think it's a surprise to many that this highly obscure game is my number 1, it's something I've mentioned a few times in both of my channels. Actually, this was one of the very last NES games I played before I moved on to the Super Nintendo. It's a science fiction side-scroller that has several gameplay styles. The first stage will always be a regular platformer where you'll need to find a secret door to take down a boss. By doing so, you'll unlock the next area. More platforming, but with more puzzles will be there, but always inside a base. These bases will also include small horizontal shoot-em-up parts, where you'll need to enter into the right door to move on. The secondary stages will always be shoot-em-up missions again, but mostly in outside areas. These can be pretty tough and hard to control as they aren't greatly designed. I still like them though. And then you'll face the boss at the top of a small moving platform. I really love every single boss fight as they all look epic, cool and interesting. The music stands out beautifully in this game, even though you only have like 4 or 5 themes looping all over the place. I love Xevious and I wish more people got to know it and play it, even though I have to admit it's very hard and not really for everyone. But it's still my favorite video game on the NES. Decap Attack. This is a game that usually comes in a lot of collections, a lot of Sega Genesis collections. The version I played comes on the PS4 Sega Genesis collection, and it's a side-scroller platformer adventure game that's very weird, obviously, because you control this headless guy, this headless creature, hence the name Decap Attack, and you use your head to attack and you jump and all that jazz. But the thing is that the game, it controls in a very slippery manner. I mean, it's hard to control the character, but that's the whole point of the game, to make her even crazier, to make the gameplay crazier, as crazy as its ideas, as its enemies, as everything else. And this is a game that's part of a series. Many people don't know the series because, number one, it's a very obscure series of very obscure games. But you may have heard of a game called Kid Cool, which the AVGN trashed a long time ago. It's a bad game. But the other 2 games are good, which are Decap Attack, and there's this Fox game, I forget the name. Decap Attack is very good, it's very challenging, and it has a little bit of Metroidvania feels, because it's not just run from point A to point B, you gotta find certain things and certain items to progress with the game. Even if you beat the boss, if you didn't find these items, or if you didn't do this or that, you still gotta do it before you can reach the next level. and this is a game that stands out like crazy because of the music. My god, what an amazing soundtrack, it's very good. Great game, just very challenging, hard to control, and well, you play the game if you're in a crazy mood. That's pretty much it. Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax. Released in Japan on the arcades and later ported to the PS Vita and PS3, and it's yet another crossover, inviting characters from light novels, games, and anime series, like for example, Durarara and Sword Art Online. It also features characters from Virtua Fighter and Valkyria Chronicles, but you gotta unlock them first. A wide variety of fighters you can choose from, and also with an assist partner that can be summoned to make a move during battle. This one is heavily based on combos, so it's all about mashing your buttons to beat the crap out of everyone. It has great controls and it feels awesome to fight any contestant. It also got an updated version called Ignition, but that one stayed in Japan. This vanilla one, however, is a masterpiece and a must play if you're into 2D fighters. Advanced Guardian Heroes. Remember that cult classic game on the Sega Saturn? Well, this is its sequel on the Game Boy Advance. Here you choose a customized warrior to fight the heroes from the previous game to earn their powers. It's basically a beat 'em up with RPG elements, and those revolve around leveling up after each mission. You will be able to distribute points on the status of your character, of course, so depending on them he will perform differently with each type of attack. It's all into building the combos though, even jumping around and kicking about. The controls are surprisingly decent considering the GBA wasn't exactly great for action games. It can feel very technical at times, but also satisfying to beat the crap out of your enemies. However, some of them will require different means for you to destroy them, sometimes involving the use of magic. I gotta admit, it's a very good follow-up to the classic on the Saturn, which also influenced the action RPG on the 3DS and Switch called Code of Princess. After all, that game was made by remnants of the development team behind these two amazing games. Neo Geo Heroes Ultimate Shooting. I bet you didn't know this one existed, huh? It's a pretty solid crossover if you like SNK like me. It's a vertical shoot 'em up with various characters from the King of Fighters series and a few others from other games like Metal Slug or Samurai Showdown. Story's there and all, but it's honestly senseless like in most crossovers. Anyway, my only gripe with this game is the resolution. Not sure why the screen looks so small in the center, but if you can't get past that like I did, it's a pretty enjoyable game. It's just crazy that there's a shoot 'em up with these characters and you actually play as them flying and shooting around. Everyone has a completely different weapon though, including the bombs and the specials. There's also several routes to follow, but you end up going through the same stages and bosses no matter who you choose. I'm not sure how great this game is because it does have its flaws. It didn't win any awards, but it's a different take on the genre. Can't believe it never got any attention at all considering it's an SNK crossover. By the way, the only physical version out there is the Japanese one. North America only got it digital. Europe didn't get it. Batman Returns. This is a beat 'em up no one ever cared or asked for. The movie spawned several games on 8-bit and 16-bit consoles. Most people are familiar with the 16-bit console versions. Because of them and their success, the NES version went severely overlooked. Not only that, critics didn't love this one because they just kept comparing it to those versions, so by the time this was released, it was automatically outdated. Well, everyone was playing the 16-bit era while I was still enjoying the 8-bit classics on the NES. This was one of those games I got in my childhood, and despite its difficulty and questionable design, I really enjoyed it. I played it dozens of times, but I only managed to beat it twice. And when you beat a really hard game on the NES when you're just a kid, you feel an euphoric sense of accomplishment. I really recommend this game, but I hope you can play it without comparing it to any other version out there. Kinetica. Kinetica is a very obscure game that is exclusive to the PlayStation 2 only in North America. Ha! 5 years ago it was digitally re-released on the PlayStation 4. It's an extremely fast-paced racing game that's obviously futuristic, and you won't believe who made it: Santa Monica Studios, creators of God of War. Not only that, the game's engine was also named Kinetica and was used precisely for the first 2 God of War games. Anyway, it's basically a competition between several races in space. These races can equip kinetic suits that basically turns them into human motorcycles. Of course, the tracks are visually stunning and are full of power-ups to make you even faster. So like I said, it's too fast but easy to control, so if you're into really quick racing games, this is a must-play. Teen Titans. I cared nothing about the animated series when it came out, and I still don't nowadays. However, the game's a completely different story. I first played it on the GameCube with my nephew, and we had a blast. But one day I got a PS2 batch with several games, this one included. It only came with the manual and the disc, sadly. The point is, this PS2 version was just as good. Not much to say about the story and characters, only that you can choose between all 5 of them. They play very differently, so it might be a good idea to check them all out at first. Obviously, the game has a local multiplayer mode, so playing it with somebody else was a blast. Forget about the cartoon, man. Check this game out if you like 3D beat-em-ups, as it's definitely one of the best ones I've played of its kind. Dead Smiles. Another horizontal shoot-em-up by Cave, this one starring gothic lolitas and very Halloween-esque subplots. So you can choose between them and the story changes, but they all end up going through the same stages and bosses. Music and graphics usually stand out in shoot-em-ups, and wow, this one is absolutely no exception. It gives me Tim Burton vibes here and there, overall with a very enchanting style. The gameplay is very fluid too, as it doesn't go hardcore like Akai Katana. It's definitely more balanced, but it's no walk in the park either. Controls are superb and the flow of battle while shooting feels very relaxing, but engaging at the same time. I don't care much about lolis, but I like gothic-styled characters, so I was indeed the target audience for this game. Great shoot 'em up here, also released on PC. It's set to be released alongside its digital-only sequel by the end of the year on the PS4, Xbox One, and the Switch. Closure. Closure is an environmental puzzle game developed by Glial Games, an indie studio from the United States. It was pretty much a flash game until it got ports to PCs and the PlayStation 3, digital only. In the vein of Limbo, you control this weird creature in a completely black and white environment. Later, you transform into other beings. Your goal is to find the door leading to the next stage so you can move forward. You have to pick up these balls of light sometimes, otherwise you'll fall to your death in the darkness. By positioning them on some altars or switches you can go on. So it all revolves on manipulating the lighting objects to play through the game. It's very entertaining and the music is also quite interesting. Give this one a try before the PlayStation 3 store shuts down for good one day. Worms Open Warfare. Yeah, laugh all you want. I'm a fan of these silly games for how stupid but addictive they are. Now, Worms is a pretty famous series, but I believe some titles are underrated or even very obscure. I bet a lot of you didn't know there was one for the PSP. Actually, there's two, but I like the first one way more. It's underrated because of that, and also because I believe it's one of the best out there. I love how you can just play simple matches over and over and never get tired. I like the controls, I believe they're better than in its sequel or in the one on the DS. The weapons are stupidly creative. Other games had funnier weapons, I admit, but I really like the ones here. You've got several voice samples for what the different types or races of worms say, even though they all look the same. I just love some of the quotes they say. In case you've never played a single Worms game, I'll explain briefly what they're about. Basically, you choose or customize a team of 4 worms that you'll control in a turn-based system. You can fight against one computer team or several of them. In Open Warfare, it's 3 other teams. And then you select the areas you'll fight in, where all teams will battle each other until one is victorious. And that's pretty much it. They're very fun strategy games, and I think this one in particular is very underrated. GrimGrimoire. I'm glad we arrived at this masterpiece, cause if we're talking about unique, this one takes the cake. It's a cross-genre game, but at its core, it's a tower defense. It is the second game developed by famous company Vanillaware, although it was the first one they released. You control Lilith Blanc in a quest to become a magician at a magic school. Though sooner than later, she realizes she's trapped in a loop, repeating the same 5 days over and over. Your goal is to find out what's going on by participating into tower defense battles with your grimoires. Each of these magical books can summon different creatures to fight, defend, or gather mana, so your runes can keep summoning them. Usually missions revolve around destroying the enemy runes, defending yours, or merely surviving, so it spices things up to avoid being repetitive. Overall, it's a fantastic game that I wish could get a modern re-release, if at least digitally, so more people can play it. Battle Fantasia. Another one released for those three systems is this beautifully looking 2D fighting game. Though the physical PS3 version was only released in Europe, North America got it digital. Anyway, this was developed by my favorite fighting company, Arc System Works. It was like an attempt to turn an RPG into a fighting game, so yeah, some very small RPG features here, but it's 90% a fighter. It often appears on Hidden Gems videos for good reasons. One, because it sold poorly even though lots of magazines and websites reviewed it. Of course, they weren't impressed because they probably wanted to play Street Fighter. Second, sure, it's no masterpiece, but it's very good and quite unique for its features. The graphics and the character design alone are good enough reasons to play this awesome game. It has a very cool story mode, which is told sometimes as in a storybook, and there's also several quirky characters to choose from. This 360 version is still kinda cheap nowadays, so pick it up if you see it around. Skullgirls. Developed by USA studio Reverge Labs, it's a 2D fighting game initially released almost 10 years ago. First it was digital only on the PlayStation Store and the Xbox Live service. It later received releases on modern systems, including a Windows version. When it was ported to the PS4 and the PS Vita, it was called Skullgirls Second Encore. It confused people as they believed it was a second game in the series, but it was just an enhanced port, and the best one out there in my opinion. For a time, it was a somewhat popular game, but ratings weren't that great because of its controversial art style. Some censorship issues were there that also affected its mainstream popularity. The game's plot revolves around an artifact called the Skull Heart, but if a girl with impure soul or dirty secrets wishes for it, they become Skullgirls. So it was controversial for those things, including a lawsuit, troubles with Konami, and a rebrand for the developer name. Wow, screw all that, man. This is an excellent game with great controls, awesome tag team combat with character assists and a badass combo system. Either version you play is just as good, but I recommend either the PS4 or PS Vita ones, although physical versions of any version of this game can go for stupid prices nowadays. White Day, a labyrinth called School, something like that. It's a weird subtitle. And yes, it's a Korean survival horror game, not a Japanese one. And it takes place precisely in a school. And this is a first-person survival horror game. And you're probably wondering, but Eric, you don't like any first-person games, and that's right. But this, I like to believe it's an exception because it really got me interested. It got me, hooked up in the game. And I believe it has some interesting mechanics because it takes some small influence from games like Clock Tower or Hunting Ground, where there's a character chasing you or trying to find you and kill you. So you gotta hide often. And then there's a lot of puzzle making, of course, like in many survival horror games, like get this key to open the door that's all the way in the back, to get the gem that fits in this locker and whatever. So there's a lot of puzzle solving as usual, but the gist of the game is precisely that it takes place in a school. You are a student and you're trying to hide from these supernatural, enemies or pretty much the natural enemies. I don't want to spoil too much because explaining what the enemies are is a huge spoiler in the game. So White Day on the PlayStation 4, it's also on mobile devices and on PC. Danganronpa, another episode, Ultra Despair Girls. The Danganronpa series is huge in Japan. If anything, all of their games are extremely popular, including the anime series. Overseas, they also enjoy some excellent ratings and mainstream success, but there's one particular game in this series that stands out for being different. You see, all the others are visual novels with puzzle elements. Ultra Despair Girls, however, is both a third-person shooter and a hack and slash. It also has the usual RPG elements in there, like equipping accessories, leveling up, talking to people, etc. But I mean, what action-adventure game nowadays doesn't have them? I played this excellent game on the Vita and it's one of the wackiest experiences I've ever had, but the writing, however bizarre the story might be, is superb. You follow the quest of Komaru and Toko trying to escape an apocalyptic city overrun by Monokuma robots. This game takes place after the events of the very first Danganronpa game, and it is connected as Toko comes from there and Komaru is the sister of the main character in there. You don't, however, really need to play it to understand this one. In fact, I think watching the anime might be enough. So Komaru handles the third-person shooting, fighting with a megaphone that shoots hacking bullets and various sound bullets that affect her enemies. Switching to Toko gives you the hack and slash features, but only for a limited amount of time. Overall, this is a fantastic game, very unique, with great writing and excellent soundtrack.